The drill begins spinning at the Veracruz site. Around it, teams and authorities watch what is being presented as the start of one of the largest infrastructure projects in Brazil. After decades of studies, promises, and renegotiations, the Salvador-Itaparica Bridge is finally starting to become a reality. But the image requires caution, a lot of caution, because starting a massive construction project doesn't mean seeing kilometers of piers advancing over the water. Between the ceremony, the initial work, and the complete crossing, there is a technical, financial, and environmental path that is more complex than the images can show. Machines, workers, and materials have already been mobilized. However, there are stages still being defined, structures that need to be built, and challenges hidden beneath the Bay of All Saints. So, what actually started in July 2026? How much is left for the bridge to stop being just a construction site on the banks and start advancing over the sea? Stay with us for the next few minutes and understand the real status of the Salvador-Itaparica Bridge, the advantages and the obstacles that could define the future of the project. The Salvador-Itaparica Bridge will cross the Bay of All Saints between the San Joaquin Terminal in Salvador and the municipality of Veracruz on Itaparica Island. It will be 12.4 kilometers entirely over the water. However, the bridge represents a partnership. It's the visible part of a larger system. The project includes 4 kilometers of access roads, tunnels, and viaducts in Salvador. It also includes a 22-kilometer expressway in Veracruz and the widening of 8 kilometers of roadway from BA001 to the Funal Bridge. Altogether, these improvements total 44.8 kilometers. In practice, the connection aims to create a second road route out of Salvador, which currently depends heavily on BR-324. This way, part of the traffic heading to Recôncavo, Baixo Sul, and Litoral Sul will be able to avoid the long land detour. But there's an important correction. The Salvador-Itaparica Bridge will not be the longest bridge in Brazil. The Rio Niterói Bridge is 13.29 kilometers long in total, of which 8.88 kilometers are over the sea. Therefore, the Rio Niterói Bridge will remain longer in total length. As for Salvador-Itaparica, it is expected to be the largest bridge in Latin America, entirely over the water. So the question that remains is, why did such a strategic connection take decades to reach the construction stage? All Saints Bay has favored ports, navigation, and tourism. At the same time, it became a barrier between Salvador and the regions to the south and west of the capital. Without a direct road connection, the driver has to choose between the ferryboat and the long detour. By land, taking the BR-324 before heading back toward the Recôncavo, the Baixo Sul, or Taparica Island. That's why the proposal to cross the bay by building a bridge has been circulating for decades. The current project gained momentum in 2010 when private companies began conducting studies. The public consultation took place in 2018. The bidding process moved forward the following year, and the concession contract was signed in November 2020. On paper, the concessionaire would be responsible for building, operating, and maintaining the system. However, the pandemic changed the economic conditions of the bidding process. Steel, cement, engineering services, interest rates, and the cost of capital all went up, affecting a contract that was initially estimated at around billion reais. In February 2025, the Bahia State Court of Accounts approved the settlement, which updated the total contract value to approximately 10.42 billion reais, increased the public contribution, and modified the payments. The implementation period was extended to 6 years. The contract amendment was signed in June 2020, with the first year reserved for the completion of the projects, obtaining licenses, setting up construction sites, and mobilization. The following 5 years are for construction, with completion scheduled for June 2031. Thus, July 2026 marked less the birth of the bridge and more the transition from a long contractual preparation to the concrete challenge of engineering. From that point on, promises would need to turn into foundations, pillars, and a schedule, a project effectively carried out. As of this video's publication, the Itaparica Bridge is officially under construction. There are construction sites, workers, equipment, materials, and an active work front in Veracruz. Pillar number 1, where the inaugural event took place, is on solid ground and marks the progress toward the bay. However, the maritime construction has not reached full speed. In July 2026, the initial part of the detailed design for the foundations was still undergoing final review. The Salvador City Hall reported that it had only received applications for construction sites and geotechnical surveys. The concessionaire's financing contract with Banco do Nordeste was also still under review. One of the first structures being implemented is the temporary platform along the crossing. It will function as an industrial access road over the water, allowing the movement of workers, machines, cranes, steel, and concrete. Without this structure, materials and teams would depend more on barges and boats. According to the concessionaire, the platform could reduce the number of support vessels by about 70. It will also have openings to preserve navigation, smaller boats, and fishing activities. The platform will not be part of the final bridge. Its function will be to support logistics. As it moves forward, marine foundation work should begin. It's underwater where some of the biggest challenges appear. The surveys lasted 14 months, and they drilled 105 holes. In the deepest areas, the water depth reached about 67 meters. Meanwhile, the geological investigations reached depths of about 200 meters in some places. In addition, the surveys found a heterogeneous subsoil with sediments, less resistant materials, and fragile rocks. That's why part of the foundations had to be recalculated. The first step will be to drive large steel tubes. Then will come the internal excavation, reinforcement steel and concrete pouring. Foundation blocks will distribute the loads to the pillars, followed by crossbeams, bearings, and the deck. Sequence seems simple: pile, block, pillar, bearing, and deck. In practice, however, each element requires strict control in an environment with tides, wind, currents, salt water, and varying depths. There's also a logistical challenge here. Part of the precast components will be produced in San Roque do Paraguaçu and Maragogipe, at a site of about 400,000 square meters, designed as a factory for the bridge components. These pieces will need to cross the bay and arrive at the exact assembly point. For most of the crossing, foundations and pillars can be repeated in series. In the center of the bay, however, the design changes. That's where the cable-stayed section goes. Inclined cables will connect the deck to the towers, allowing for longer spans without installing pillars inside the main navigation channel. According to the update from the concessionaire published on July 24, 2026, the central span was increased from 482 meters to 682 meters, maintaining a clearance height of 85 meters, and the towers will be 248 meters tall. This central section represents the critical path of the project. If the towers, foundations, cables, or deck are delayed, other parts may be ready without the crossing being completed. Besides, the bridge won't work on its own. In Salvador, tunnels, viaducts, and connections with the expressway and Equitagia and Engenheiro Oscar Pontes avenues will be needed. On the island, the bridge will need to integrate with the new expressway, the Mar Grande bypass, and the widening of BA001. So, finishing the pillars over the water doesn't mean the system is complete. Up to this point, the status is clear. The actual mobilization and construction have moved beyond the purely documentary phase. However, it's still at the beginning. The decisive progress will be proven when the offshore foundations multiply, the pillars advance across the bay, and the deck becomes continuous between Salvador and Veracruz. To understand the scale of the bridge from Salvador to Itaparica, it's worth making a comparison with the Brazilian bridge used as the main reference, the Rio-Niterói Bridge. It is 13.29 kilometers in total, just 890 meters longer than the future Bahia connection. However, the stretch over the sea measures 8.83 kilometers. This means that Salvador and Itaparica will have approximately 3.53 kilometers more over the water. about 40% more than the over-water length of the Rio Niterói Bridge. Considering a soccer field with 105 meters in length, which is common in large stadiums, the 12.4 kilometers would be equivalent to approximately 118 fields lined up in a row. But the length is only part of the challenge. In the central channel, the water reaches about 67 meters. The drilling holes, on the other hand, reached up to 200 meters. To understand such depth, imagine a building about 67 stories, tall, buried vertically beneath the surface of the bay. The 85 meters of vertical clearance above the cable stayed section correspond to a building of approximately 28 stories. And this represents only the space needed for large ships to pass under the deck, not the full height of the towers. When it comes to money, the numbers vary depending on the date we're talking about. The updated contract is around 10.42 billion reais, while an estimate from July 2026 points to 11.6 billion for the construction. The advantages of the project are concrete. The bridge will be able to connect Salvador to inland areas, reducing dependence on the BR-324. By making the Baixo Sul region more accessible, the project also promotes tourism and reorganizes the flow of cargo, services, and passengers. The concessionaire estimates 28,000 vehicles per day initially, a reduction of 2 hours on certain trips, and economic influence over 250 municipalities. These projections, however, need to be interpreted correctly. However, not all drivers will save 2 hours. The benefit will depend on the origin, the destination, the traffic, and the comparison used. In the same way, the 10 million beneficiaries represent the population of the area of influence, not direct users. Another aspect deserves attention here. The bridge will have a toll. The business plan uses values from January 2019, with tolls of 45 reais on the Salvador-Itaparica Bridge and 5 reais on the Funil Bridge. These amounts will be adjusted, therefore drivers shouldn't expect to pay exactly 45 in 2081. The cost won't fall solely on private investors. According to the Bahia State Court of Auditors, the renegotiation raised the public contribution to 5.07 billion reais in August 2024 values, and it redefined the annual payments. On the other hand, improved access can stimulate hotels, commerce, construction, and real estate appreciation, but it can also make land more expensive and put pressure on communities. According to the Federal Public Prosecutor's Office and the Bahia Public Prosecutor's Office, the agreement provides for the hiring of an external, independent, and multidisciplinary consultancy to monitor licensing and the impacts on ecosystems, artisanal fishing, and land use. In this way, we can say that the Salvador-Itaparica Bridge is underway, but it still doesn't yet connect Bahia. So far, progress has been concentrated on the construction sites, the logistics platform, and the first onshore work area. The project can transform mobility and the economy of Bahia, but before that, it will need to overcome irregular underground conditions, complete the engineering, secure financing, and manage land use impacts. After all, the biggest challenge wasn't the groundbreaking ceremony, it will be the sequence of piers advancing over the water. Thanks for watching until the end. What are your thoughts on the bridge from Itaparica to Salvador? Is it taking too long? Has construction really started? Let me know in the comments if you're following this project closely. I'll be happy to read all of them. That's it for now. Take care and see you in the next video.